The soil has always spoken to me. For 50 years, I've listened to its secrets, learning where the first crocus would break through the winter frost and which branch the wrens would choose for their nest. I thought I knew every secret my land held. But the deepest secret, the one that would save it all, wasn't in the soil at all. It was buried in a filing cabinet downtown, and I owe my sanity to a man who loves compost almost as much as I do. My nephew didn't ask for a cutting from my prized rose bush. He hired a surveyor to parcel my entire garden into lots for a condo development he'd already named the Thornberry Estates. I came outside one morning to find a man in a bright orange vest planting little flags where my lavender border bloomed. "Aunt Alara," Colin called out, striding across the lawn with his wife Brenda trailing behind him, her high heels sinking into the soft earth. "Just getting some measurements for the property taxes." But when they came inside, it wasn't tax forms they spread across my kitchen table. It was architectural renderings. Gleaming, soulless condos stood where my foxgloves danced in the breeze. "It's progress, Aunt Alara," Colin said, his voice full of a patronizing certainty that made my hands curl into fists. "This neighborhood is changing. You can't stand in the way of progress." "This isn't progress," I said, my voice trembling not with weakness, but with a rage so profound it threatened to choke me. "This is destruction." Brenda smiled her tight, professional smile. "It's just grass and dirt, Alara. Think of the financial security. It's an offer you can't refuse." Then she showed me the paperwork. They'd found some lapsed zoning variants, arguing my land wasn't a single lot but could be subdivided. They were partnering with a developer. If I didn't sell, they'd drag me into a costly legal battle I could never afford. I felt the walls closing in. My garden, my sanctuary since I was a young bride, had been reduced to a line on a spreadsheet. The loneliness after my dear friend Maeve's death became a crushing weight. I was being bulldozed. I found Mr. Henderson weeding the community plot, his gnarled hands black with soil. "Henry," I whispered, tears mingling with the spring rain on my face. "They're going to pave it." He didn't look up from his work, just gave a soft, non-committal grunt. "Are they now?" he murmured, pulling a stubborn dandelion root from the earth. "We'll see about that." The next day, he was waiting on my porch with a thin, dusty folder he'd unearthed from the city archives. "Your mother," he said, a triumphant grin spreading across his weathered face. "She was a hell of a lot smarter than your nephew." He showed me the document, a conservation easement my mother had placed on the property decades ago. It legally bound the land to remain a green space forever. It had been misfiled, but it was perfectly valid. Colin's entire plan wasn't just aggressive, it was legally impossible. This was the discovery that changed everything. The soil was fighting back. Our counterattack was quiet, elegant, and devastating. With Mr. Henderson's guidance, I officially filed the easement with the city clerk, creating an immovable legal barrier. But we didn't stop there. We learned Colin and the developer had already spent millions on pre-construction sales. So, we anonymously tipped off the local historical society about my garden's unique heirloom plant species, some, like the Maeve's blush peony, found nowhere else. The garden was swiftly designated a protected urban habitat. The developer, realizing he'd been sold a fantasy, sued Colin for fraud. The walls were closing in, but now they were closing in on him. Financially ruined and desperate, Colin retaliated with a cruelty that stole my breath. He came to my house, his face a mask of fury, and slapped a stack of papers on my table. They were my old medical records, from a dark time of deep depression after my husband's death. "Sign this," he demanded, pointing to a document that would void the easement. "Or I go to the court and prove you're an unstable recluse. Your irrational attachment to weeds proves you're not fit to manage this property. They'll put me in charge." I was terrified. He was using my deepest pain as a weapon. But Mr. Henderson, ever the steady hand, urged me to see my own strength. "He's desperate, Alara. Desperate people make mistakes." And Colin had. In his haste, he'd committed a felony. We discovered he had impersonated me to illegally access those confidential medical records. This was the final shift. I would not hide from my past. I walked into the police station with Mr. Henderson at my side and filed a report for identity theft. Then I called a reporter from the local paper. I didn't give an interview about the garden. I gave one about resilience. I spoke about grief, about the healing power of the earth, and how my garden had saved me when nothing else could. I reframed my instability as a human journey, making Colin's blackmail attempt look like the monstrous act it was. The public sympathy that rallied behind me was a fortress he could not breach. The conclusion was a justice more satisfying than any I could have imagined. Colin was charged with identity theft and illegal access to private records. The conservation easement stood, ironclad. But I didn't just save my garden. I gave it a new purpose. Using the small settlement I received, I created a nonprofit, the Moss Sanctuary, dedicating my land as a public healing garden in my late friend Maeve's name. They thought they could bury me under concrete. But they forgot what gardeners know, that deep roots are the strongest. To anyone feeling uprooted by those you trusted, plant your feet. Dig in. Your ground is your own. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't a lawyer or a threat, it's a seed of truth, patiently waiting for its time in the sun. The victory was sweet, but the garden felt different now. It was no longer just my private sanctuary, it was a testament, a battleground I had won. The first week after the legal dust settled, I walked the paths with Mr. Henderson, our footsteps silent on the soft earth. The protected urban habitat sign stood proudly by the gate, a shield against future threats. "It's quiet," I said, my voice sounding loud in the morning hush. "It's peace," Alara, Henry replied, his hands tucked into his worn jacket. "Earned peace. But it won't stay quiet for long." He was right, of course. The newspaper article had sparked something. Letters began arriving, not just from our town, but from across the state. They were from people who had also fought for their little patches of earth, community gardens threatened by parking lots, ancient woodlands facing the chainsaw, backyard habitats for migratory birds. They wrote to me, Alara Moss, the gardening granny who had stood her ground. One letter stood out. It was from a woman named Sarah, her handwriting shaky with age and emotion. She wrote of a century-old oak wood behind her house, slated for clearance for a new warehouse. "They say it's just trees," she wrote, echoing Brenda's cruel words. "But they're my cathedral." I showed the letter to Henry that afternoon over tea in my kitchen. "We have to do something, Henry. We can't just be a symbol. We have to be a tool." And so, the Moss Sanctuary evolved. It became more than a garden, it became a nerve center. Henry, with his encyclopedic knowledge of city planning and zoning law, became our chief strategist. I, with my eye for detail and a lifetime of patience, became the archivist. We set up a small office in what was once my potting shed, now insulated and equipped with a second-hand computer that Henry's grandson helped us navigate. We didn't have the money for lawyers, but we had something more potent: information. Henry taught me how to research property titles, how to file freedom of information requests, how to find the hidden clauses and forgotten easements that could save a piece of land. We created a network, connecting people like Sarah with pro bono legal aid and environmental groups. We were gardeners, yes, but we were cultivating resistance. This new, public role did not go unnoticed. A month into our work, a sleek, black car pulled up outside my gate. A man in an expensive suit got out. He introduced himself as Robert Thorne. The lead developer Colin had partnered with the one who had sued my nephew for fraud. "Ms. Moss," he said, offering a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "I'm here to make amends." A gesture of goodwill. He presented a check, a staggering sum, made out to the Moss Sanctuary. "To support your admirable work." No strings attached. Except there were always strings. Henry, who had been watching from the porch, came to stand beside me. "He's not donating, Alara," Henry said, his voice low. "He's investing. He's buying silence. Or worse, legitimacy." I looked from the check to Thorne's smug face. I imagined the century-old oaks in Sarah's letter crashing to the ground. My hand did not tremble as I tore the check in half and let the pieces flutter to the ground. "Our work is not for sale, Mr. Thorne," I said. "Some things have roots too deep for your money to reach." His smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You're making a powerful enemy, old woman." "No," I replied, feeling a strength I hadn't known was there. "You are." The threat was implicit, but the next attack was more subtle. A week later, a series of anonymous op-eds appeared in a local business journal. They questioned the financial management of the mosque sanctuary, hinting at questionable expenditures and nepotism, a vicious nod to my involvement with Henry. It was a smear campaign designed to erode our credibility and scare off our fledgling network of supporters. It was then that I realized the battle for the garden was never truly over. It had just shifted shape. They weren't trying to pave it anymore. They were trying to poison its reputation. We fought back the only way we knew how, with transparency and truth. We opened our books to the public, posted our modest budget online, and held a Welcome to the Sanctuary Day. Hundreds of people came, wandering the paths, children laughing where condos were meant to stand. The story in the press shifted again, from scandal to celebration. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place thanks to Sarah. With the resources and legal guidance we connected her with, her community managed to unearth a forgotten wetland survey that put a halt to the warehouse development. She sent me a pressed oak leaf in her next letter, a simple, powerful token of thanks. I keep it on my desk in the potting shed, next to a photo of Maeve. My garden is louder now, filled with the voices of visitors and volunteers. It is no longer just my refuge. It is a library of living things, a classroom, a fortress. Colin is gone, his name a bitter memory. Mr. Thorne's company faces new scrutiny on all its projects. And I, Alara Moss, the gentle botanical illustrator, am now the director of a quiet revolution. They thought they were dealing with a lonely old woman tending her flowers. They didn't understand that a lifetime of nurturing fragile, beautiful things teaches you not just how to care, but how to fight. The deepest roots, after all, are not the ones you see, but the ones that form a tangled, unbreakable network beneath the surface, holding the whole world together.